So I'm here with Gerald Hansen of Pine Meadow Farms, right?
Pine Meadows Hobby Farm.
Pine Meadows Hobby Farm. And he's going to be interviewing me and ask me questions. And basically, a lot of these are things that I share with people. So this is going to be really nice to be able to share this video with people. And we'll get on with the interview.
But as you notice, I am not on Pine Meadows Hobby Farm today. I'm actually up in Hugo, Oregon at R&R Resource Dairy Goat Farm, and this is one of the owners. This is Yvonne Roberts. She's the one that sold me Dexter and Stewart over here. So I get to take them home today and introduce them to their new home. In the meantime, we get to tap this lady's knowledge in about goats.
As he said, I'm Yvonne Roberts, and we have a dairy farm, and he's going to be asking me some questions, but I just wanted to make sure everybody knows I'm not a vet, and so any of the medical information that I'm sharing are things that have worked with my goats. And like I tell people that I mentor, everybody's goats are different, everybody's properties, what they feed their goats are different. So what works for me and my lifestyle may not work for everybody, but I can let you know what I do with my goats, and it'll give you something to try when you're working with your own goats.
Okay, let's talk about ages of the goats, like a doe. How old should a doe be before we start breeding? And how old should a buck be before we start breeding?
Well, some people breed them earlier, but we have found with our lines and our goats that they do better if we wait until they're 18 months, so a year and a half. And then when they kid the first time, they'll be 2 years old. And we feel we do that because they're more mature at 18 months, so they're kind of more through with growing themselves instead of having to grow themselves and the baby inside of them at the same time. And so they mature, better, easier. You don't have to put as much feed into them when you do it that way. Well, bucklings don't really have to be mature like does, so they can breed at a younger age. And every buck we've had, we've used the first time between 6 and 8 months old. So they can be bred the first year because they don't have to work after the breeding. So they just breed and they're done, and so they don't have to be as mature. But they can actually be fertile down to a month old, and whenever you're ready, they're ready to breed. And usually between 6 and 8 months is when we start using ours. And that's Pepper.
Now that we've bred them, what's the gestation for a kid?
Our goats tend to be 153 days. It's approximately 5 months, but they different lines and different breeds can be different amounts, but it's approximately 5 months, and you'll have to find out what gestation is correct on yours within a certain number of days.
Okay, now that the goats are born, what are the periodic medications you want to give your goats? In what time period?
Okay, our area is really selenium deficient, so that depends on your area because even like Klamath Falls is an hour and a half, 2 hours from here, and they are not near as deficient as we are. So it makes a difference on that for it's called a BOCI shot, and BOCI is selenium and vitamin E. Because we're so deficient here, we have blocks out for them, all kinds of minerals, but we also give the does a shot when they kid and the babies a shot when they're born. So as I'm drying the baby off, I give them their BOCI shot. So they get that, and then the babies I give per a vet's instruction to me years ago when we were having issues with the babies. We are so deficient here that it helps and we give local hay, which makes a difference. A lot of people here feed Klamath hay. Ours is grown locally, which makes it less selenium in it. So we give ours the BOCI shot once a month at birth, and then once a month for at least 3 or 4 shots. And then after that, everybody gets it 3 to 4 times a day or a year. So, but they'll get the series in the spring, and then they'll get like a fall shot and then the following year it'll start their 3 or 4 shots every year. But so we give BOCI, we give it's called CDT, and that is a vaccination, and we do that basically anytime after a week or so old, and that's every 3 weeks. When they're babies, they get boosters, and it is the same dose for a baby as it is for an adult, which is, seems like a lot. You're given 2 cc's, says it on the bottle, so you just follow the directions on the bottle. It's given every 3 weeks, and we tend to do those 4 to 5 times, and then after that it's yearly, once in the spring, and that's it. So the babies get boosters of that. And then we also, as a prevention, do a coccidia treatment just as a prevention. Even if they don't have any signs of it around a month old, we do Corid, and we give it to all the babies. Usually do them all at the same time. When we get them around a month old, we'll just go through and give everybody. It's a 5-day treatment. You just put it in their mouth 5 days in a row, and it's done. We follow it up with vitamin B, because Corid tends to, blocks the thiamine absorption. So you follow it up with vitamin B after you're done, and that boosts their vitamin B back up. So that's as far as vaccinations and shots and things like that, that's what we do first.
Good information. What is a typical goat's diet for the buck, the doe, the kids?
Well, basically we feed all our goats alfalfa hay. Bucks and does, everything gets alfalfa hay all through everything. So that has a lot of protein and calcium in it. It kind of helps with growing them, but also growing the babies inside of them. We don't tend to grain the does at all until the last few weeks before they kid, and we start introducing grain. When it's their first time, sometimes they don't like it because they've never had it, so it kind of gives them a chance to get used to eating it, and we just take them up to maybe a half a cup a day the last week or so before they're due, and then after they kid, then we can increase it as needed. But we've found if you give them very much grain while they're pregnant, it makes the babies big rather than putting the weight on the mother. So if they're dropping weight because they're pregnant, we only would do a little bit because of that, because they would just make bigger babies, which means harder birthing. So you don't want to give them a lot of grain while they're pregnant.
Okay. Any special nutrition while they're lactating?
We do give them calcium supplements, and interesting enough, we used to do Tums. That's what we were told at the beginning by another breeder to, as just a supplement to give them every day because it has calcium in it. And our chiropractor actually told us that better than Tums is the little gummies that you buy at the grocery store, the calcium gummies. So that's what my goats get every day now, is a calcium gummy. So that's their calcium supplement. If they are milking a lot, they get more. If they're not milking very much, they don't get the supplement. So it just depends on how much they're needing the calcium. But there's, as far as grain, there's other things to give them. But as far, just supplements, that's what we tend to do, is just a calcium supplement. But we have loose minerals and mineral blocks out for them too.
What is the signs of a doe to look for when she becomes in estrus?
In heat.
In heat?
Heat.
In heat.
In heat. Yes.
Okay, when a doe is in heat, what are the signs to look for that she's going to be ready to start breeding with a male?
The two biggest signs that I see in my herd is, they call it flagging, and it's where they do their tail really fast. I mean, if you're used to your doe, you're watching your doe all the time, and they're flipping at flies and they're doing that, they wag their tail. But when they're in heat, they wag their tail. So we call that flagging. They just wag it a lot. And the other thing is yelling. So if you have a nice quiet doe and all of a sudden she is very vocal, she's calling in a male. She's trying, she's yelling and saying, "I'm ready." So that's the two. There are, other signs that some have and some don't, but the two most obvious ones I always tell people is watch for the flagging and the yelling. That's your two. And what we do, and we recommend other people to do, is, like, if you want to you figure out when you want your babies in the spring. So if you want March babies, you're going to breed in October. Okay, so in September, or it's August to September is when they usually start coming in heat. And so you watch for those signs. And when you see what you think they're in heat, mark it on the calendar and watch for it again. And if you see it again, mark it on the calendar and look. And if it was 3 weeks, then you got your signs right. You know what that doe does when she comes in heat, and we call that tracking. You can actually mark it down every time, so when it's time to breed, then you go, okay, she's got another week, she's coming in heat, well, that one's going to come in then, and so you can kind of arrange who you want to breed first according, and then you breed it. You know when they're going to come, approximately within a few days you'll know, and some come in at 3 weeks exactly, and some come in at 18 days, and some come at 22, but they usually have a cycle that each doe has their time, but it's approximately 3 weeks. But it's really handy to be able to track that, and also for new people to see, oh, they're right, because she did this 3 weeks ago. That's how that one shows her heat. She's yelling again. Maybe she didn't wag her tail, but she's yelling, and she did that 3 weeks ago for no reason. So that's what she's going to do. So you can kind of, plan on your breeding that way. So you can, and make sure that you're right, that she is in heat. So.
And hoof care, what do you do about hoof care? How young should a goat be before you start thinking about hoof care?
Well, honestly, you probably should do it before, but we usually trim the hooves the first time when we get ready to do the August show. So in July, we'll start trimming hooves when they're born in March, but they aren't usually overgrown then. It's about right. So, if they're born March, April, July, in that range. So it depends kind of, and each one grows their hooves differently, and you'll get used to that as you have a goat. But basically, after that, we like to trim them every 4 to 6 weeks. And the bucks, we tend to go longer. They don't get grained. After they've finished their growing, it might be every 2 months, maybe even 3 months. But it depends on the goat. If you see that their hooves grow faster, you're going to have to do that one a little bit sooner. So, you kind of have to monitor that. But basically 4 to 6 weeks is, a good time if you can do it that often. The bucks, you can go a little bit longer, but it depends on the goat. So you want to see if they start getting overgrown at 4 weeks, and enough that you feel like they should have already been done, you're going to have to do them more. So you have to look at each goat's hooves and see if they're fast or slow grower. But does is usually 4 to 6 weeks is a good amount, and bucks usually 6 to 8 weeks.
What signs and symptoms should we be wary for that would show a goat being ill?
First sign, they're not hungry. If a goat feels good, they're hungry. Whether it's a baby, and that's one of the nice things about we raise them on the bottle, so we can see right off if somebody's off their milk, they're sick, there's something wrong, you need to do that. The does are basically, and the bucks are basically the same way. When you bring the hay out, everybody comes up and eats. If somebody's standing off to the side and they're not eating, they're not hungry, you go find out why, because something's bad wrong if they're not eating. So that's the number one sign. The other is just being lethargic, putting head down, just not active, and you can look at them and see that they're that one doesn't look right. And so if you're aware of your goats, it's hot right now, they're all laying down over there, but when they come up to eat, you're out there with them, they're walking around. If somebody's off to the side, away from everybody, got their head down, they just look like they don't feel good, there's something wrong with that one, and you need to check. And the babies, extremely, if they're not eating, something bad wrong, they can go down a lot quicker. So the babies, so you want to really be aware if there's a baby that's off by itself, not hungry when you feed, not looking very good, then you need to go check it and make sure.
Male bucklings in the same compound together for breeding, how long do you keep them together?
We usually only keep some together for the first 6 months to a year. When we go to use them, we usually separate them. It's just easier, but we can put them back together for another year or two, and it just depends on when they start fighting so much it's not worth it. But sometimes when you have them together, even at 8 months old, somebody will be more dominant, push the others out of the feed, won't let them eat, more aggressive towards them. So to have them to where their testosterone is where it needs to be, their condition is where it needs to be. We have figured out it when we go to breeding them in the fall, we just separate them, have their own pen from then on, and just leave them separated.
Cool. So as you guys can tell, we're practicing our social distancing up here.
In case we have to get too close,
I have my mask too. So I want to thank Yvonne Roberts for hosting are being gracious to give us the information on raising goats. This is an overview. And
there's a lot more.
there is a lot more. Yeah, this is just an overview to get started on if you're going to decide to raise goats, to know kind of what to expect.
So that's the conclusion of our interview, and I hope you enjoyed it, learned some things, and I'm really happy to share this with you, this information with everyone. And thank you for watching. And if you would like to hit the subscribe button, you won't miss things that we're putting on. You know, you'll see future videos, and I do plan on doing more videos about all different topics and fun things and informative things. So hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of those. And thank you so much for watching.